There's an old saying, if you can't convince them with facts, baffle them with something. Well, when it comes to impeachment, there's been a whole lot of something going on, both in Congress and in the media. So we'll take some time today and ponder what's going on with impeachment, next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here once again with the Constitution Study, another episode of Ponder This. This is where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free. I'm glad you could join me. As always, I'm going to point you over to that website, constitutionstudy.com. See what's going on. Join a webinar, maybe buy a book, maybe donate, maybe just spread the word, spread the message. I've been invited to speak at a lot of different groups. Maybe I could join one of your groups. Want to have me come in either in person or show up over video over the internet? Hey, head over to the website. Under events, you can see where I'm going to be speaking, what I'm going to be doing, and oh yeah, you can click speaking request. You can find out where and how I can come speak to your group. So unless you've been living under a rock, you're probably aware that President Trump has been impeached. He's been voted articles of impeachment against him in the House of Representatives. And ever since then, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of opinions and relatively few facts about the impeachment process and how it's actually supposed to work. So let's talk about that. The House voted articles of impeachment against the President of the United States. Now that requires a couple things to happen. Now that he has been impeached in the House, it is up to the Senate to try that impeachment. And they have to try two things. First, they have to try the facts. Did the House make its case that there is sufficient evidence that what the President did was wrong? And two, was it sufficiently wrong to warrant removal from office? That's what the Senate has to decide. Now, in all this discussion about the Senate and the Senate rules and how they're going about doing this, everyone seems to forget that the Senate isn't completely in charge of this process. The Senate sits as jury. It's actually the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that sits as judge. We need to remember that. As of today, I think he was just sworn in as the judge overseeing this case. So we're actually starting to move somewhere. But there's a couple of things I think we should stop and consider. First of all, these articles of impeachment have been sitting around for, over a month now? Why has no one filed ethics complaints or even articles of impeachment against Nancy Pelosi for contempt of the House and obstruction of Congress? The House over a month ago voted these articles. As Speaker of the House, she has no authority to determine, once the House has decided, whether or not they actually get processed by the Senate. To do so is to hold the House in contempt. A majority of the members of the House voted articles of impeachment. To play political games with them is just about the definition of contempt. They want to hold the President in contempt of Congress. Why not hold Nancy Pelosi in contempt of the House? They say the President obstructed Congress. Well, Nancy Pelosi obstructed Congress by trying to prohibit the Senate from doing its job in trying this case unless they kowtow to her rules, something she has no constitutional authority for. So there's one thing. But now the big debate is, well, should we have witnesses? Well, all right, let's remember this is a trial. Now, it's not a criminal trial, but it is a trial in the Senate. And President Trump, he has been accused of bad actions. That means President Trump has certain rights. President Trump has the right to a speedy and public trial by jury. This has been impeded by Nancy Pelosi. I would love to see the president make charges against Nancy Pelosi saying you've denied him the right to a speedy and public trial. Well, probably a little late now. President Trump also has the right to the presumption of innocence. That means it is the House's job to prove, or at least convince 2/3 of the senators, that President Trump has done what they said he did and that it is sufficiently wrong to warrant removal. It is not the responsibility of the President Trump or his team to prove he's innocent. It's the responsibility of the House to prove that he's guilty. That's the way the judicial system works in this country, or at least the way it's supposed to. Let's not forget that President Trump, as a U.S. citizen, has the right to confront his accusers and to compel witnesses in his favor. So this whole question in the Senate about witnesses misses two very important points. It is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that sits in judgment. It is he who should be deciding what witnesses, when, and how. What I would like to see happen, I have no problem if President Trump and his team wish to compel the witnesses that testified against him in the House to do so in the Senate for cross-examination. Absolutely. That is the president's right. That's not a question for the Senate. It's not a question for the House. The president has a right to confront those who have accused him. He also has a right to compel witnesses in his favor. So if he has witnesses that prove that what he did either isn't what he's been accused of or doesn't do what he's been accused of done, he has that right to call them. And anything that denies him that right, well, there's a violation of due process. What I think a lot of people are concerned with is what happens if the prosecution, rather than bringing witnesses in support of the case they've made, use this as a fishing expedition, call other witnesses to continue the investigation. Well, that's where Chief Justice Roberts needs to step in. If every witness that the prosecution wishes to bring needs to be notified beforehand to the defense, they need to have the discovery, and they should be able to object to witnesses that are either not those who have been called in the House investigation or that they can show are not related to the charges at hand. In other words, the prosecution should not be allowed to go on a fishing expedition saying, well, we're going to bring this person in. They have nothing about the charges we've actually laid, but we were trying to find information about more charges. Let's face it. This has been turned into a political three-ring circus. And I don't see any one side being pure as a wind-driven snow. Your government, your representatives have turned the government of this country into a political sideshow. The people you hired to represent you, to do this work in your name, are now creating a spectacle for the world to see. What does it say about the American people that only a certain political party was willing to impeach the president over these charges? But they went forward anyway. What does it say about the American people that the people who represent us, the people who are doing their work in our name, are acting this way? And what does it say about us as the American people that we let it continue to happen? Now, I have my own ideas and my own predictions. When I look at this from a constitutional standpoint, we are supposed to be in a trial phase. That trial should be controlled in large part by the judge, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. But right now what we have is a political circus. And I just have one question for the American people. Is this what you hired them for? If it is, I say shame on you. If it's not, and you aren't doing anything about it, I say shame on you. See, we spend a lot of time pointing at people we want to blame, but we forget that Nancy Pelosi works for the people of San Francisco. That Senator McDonald works for the people he represents. That all of these senators, all these representatives work for the people they represent. That the president works for the states. And if we are not going to hold them accountable, if we're going to let them act however they want, if we're going to let them act like spoiled children, we should not be surprised when we get spoiled children. We should not be surprised when the milk gets spilt. We should not be surprised when the government gets trashed. We should not be surprised when the removal of a duly and legally elected officer is turned into a vendetta. This is exactly what George Washington warned about in his farewell address. It's also what James A. Garfield warned about at this country centennial. If Congress is this dysfunctional mess, it's because we let it happen. And until we learn how they're supposed to work and start holding them accountable, it's not going to get better. It is only going to get worse. So based on that, what do you think when you ponder our current impeachment fiasco? Let me know in the comments below. If I miss something, ask a question. If you think I got something wrong, put it in there and I'll answer it. The point is, when we look at what's going on in Washington, we have to stop divesting ourselves from any responsibility of what is going on there. We elected these people. And if this is what we want, it's a reflection on us, much more than it's a reflection on them. See, if we hired them to do this job this way, they're just doing what we told them to. But until we start hiring better representatives, we're going to end up with this childish mess, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Let me know what you think. Hey, if you think I'm wrong, like I said, challenge me, invite me to come to debate it with your group. Most of all, don't look at Washington, don't look at your state capitals as other people. They are your representatives, they are your employees, and it's up to us all to hold them accountable. And if you think that's a good idea, then maybe you'll visit me next time on the Constitution Study.
You have to know wherever you make your stand came from